Ricky, and today I'm going to talk about some faults, symptoms, and preliminary diagnoses that you as an owner can do and save your time and money when you encounter a bad cooling system on your cars. Usually the owners find out that they have a bad cooling system on the cars when an overheating happens, and sometimes it's very late to do anything to save that engine. But it's very rare that a fault in a cooling system causes a sudden overheat and fail of the engine, and usually they start from a small defect and grow into a big problem. Here I have listed these small but significant initial defects. One of the major problems with the cooling systems is the leakage. A leakage can have many reasons and it can start from anywhere in the system, but usually it starts with an invisible evaporation and grows into a clear reduction in level of the coolant in the system. As I said, a leakage can start from anywhere in the system, but the main reason for them is the bad sealing. So if you or a technician want to do a visual inspection to find a leaking point in the system, best practice would be checking around the connections, like around water pump housing, thermostat housing, and end of tubes and hoses. But technicians can boost the leak by pressurizing the system using special tools that are usually adapted in place of the radiator cap. Also, they can use special dyes in the system to find the leaking point using UV lights. But in practice, finding the exact leaking point can be a challenge even for an experienced technician. Sometimes a heat exchanger under the dash is losing coolant, or a leak can happen from a spot that is not visible and it flows a long distance before it gets visible. But in many cases, the owners can find the leaking point easily. If it is necessary, you can use tissue papers around connections when the engine just has turned off and is cooling, and look for any signs of coolant on them in the next morning. But remember to remove these tissues before starting the engine again. Another common issue for cooling systems is accumulation of unwanted materials on external and internal surfaces and passages. For example, dead flies and insects on the radiator fins can shut the air passage and reduce cooling capacity of the system, or scales and mineral deposits can prevent proper heat transfer between the coolant and metal surfaces. But the biggest problem that these unwanted materials can cause is a potential clog and obstruction that they can cause because many passages in the system don't have any reserve, so coolant blockage can be catastrophic for the engine. But in many cases, you can avoid these problems if you follow the instructions that are noted in your car owner's manual or in general in maintenance section of this video. Next common problem with the cooling system is fault in active components that are thermostat, radiator cap, water pump, and cooling fan. Well, certainly these active components cannot work forever continually, and even after market parts that replace them may not function as expected. And unfortunately, in many cases, fault of them can cause major problems for the cooling system and even the engine. Even diagnosis of them may not be very easy. For example, a non-functioning thermostat can be sound, but a foreign object made it stuck open or closed. Or a cooling fan can appear faulty if the coolant temperature sensor, a relay, or wiring in the system is defective. And the last but not least initial defects returns to improper installation and services. Any bad installation and service can lead to a big problem for the cooling system. For example, air bubbles trapped in the system after adding coolant can lead to misreading of the temperature sensor or formation of hot spots because they act as insulation, and even they can reduce pump flow. Even improper installation of cylinder head gasket can cause overheating very soon. About the cylinder head gasket, you need to know that it is a kind of interface of the engine block and cylinder head, and it has many holes that are part of the passage that oil and coolant flow into them. So a defective cylinder head gasket can have different symptoms. If the gasket between the combustion chamber and the oil passage is defective, exhaust gas enters the cylinder block, and if the gasket between the combustion chamber and coolant passage be defective, you can find exhaust bubbles in the radiator and see inflated hoses when the engine is in normal operating temperature, and you will have frequent overheating and reduction in coolant amount. And if the gasket between the coolant and oil passage is bad, you can have oil in the coolant or coolant in the oil. So if you find any milky or foaming oil or coolant in the engine, it can be a sign for defective cylinder head gasket. Please note that a slight milky oil inside of the engine oil filling cap is not necessarily a sign for a bad cylinder head gasket, especially in humid or winter conditions that water condensation is more significant in engine block. I hope that this video was useful and informative for you. you and worth the precious time that you spent for watching that. Please subscribe to my channel if you like and press the bell icon to be notified if I have a new video on my channel. Bye.